Hey everyone, my name is Serhiy Preychev. Welcome to my channel, FX. Here you'll find tons of adventure content, unreal locations, and fascinating military sites. So go ahead and subscribe to our channel right now, because we're just getting started, and every subscriber means a lot to us. Also, give this video a like and enjoy watching. Oleksandr Kupnyi is a legend of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. He is a dosimetrist who was the first to enter the shelter object. No one knew what was actually inside there. No one knew what the radiation levels were. And honestly, there were very few people willing to go inside the sarcophagus. And Oleksandr Kupnyi probably did this more often than anyone else on planet Earth.
In one interview, you mentioned that you actually worked just a wall away from the fourth reactor, and you always really wanted to take a look in there.
That's right.
How did you even get the idea to go into the sarcophagus? Because when people see it in photos, they think that if you just go to Pripyat, you're already dead. Even now, we often get comments like, "Oh my God, how terrifying. You drove there in a car, throw your car away."
You see, most people think that way because, for the most part, and this is still true in Ukraine, and not just here, but let's talk about Ukraine. One of the main lessons of Chernobyl hasn't been learned or put into practice. Our population is completely uneducated when it comes to radiation, absolutely zero knowledge. So for them, it's like, oh, the zone, radiation, that's it, it's the end, everyone died there. Oh, Zaporizhzhia, it's Chernobyl all over again, half of Europe will be gone. It's all because of a lack of knowledge about radiation. And if we're talking about the fourth reactor, when I got hired in May of 1988, May 5th, 1988 was my first day of work at the Chornobyl Nuclear Power Plant at the third reactor. From the very beginning, as a dosimetrist, I really wanted to get over there, so to speak, just behind that wall. From our radiation safety control panel to the guard who was stationed there, it was literally just 100, maybe 150 meters. That's right. Because, well, for dosimetry, the shelter object is like a Klondike, you could say. All types of radiation are present there, except for neutron radiation. Neutron radiation is only found in an operating reactor. You know, it's scary for those who don't know what radiation is. For people who know how to work with it and understand it, for most of them, it's actually interesting. I mean, in one place, you can measure hard beta, soft and hard gamma radiation, find alpha radiation, all in the same spot. Man, honestly, that's really cool. That's why I was so eager to go there. And in the end, my dream back then basically came true. And in the fall of '88, I finally made it there. And right away, my buddy and I went to the entrance of a central hall. Wow!
But how were you even allowed to do this, and what did the management think about it? There are people who want to go in and risk their health? What kind of consequences can there be? No one really knew.
Naturally, for the most part, these trips were illegal. But when I started working in a reconnaissance group for photo, video, and dosimetric surveys of the shelter facility, we no longer needed to ask for permission. It's right there in the name of the group. The Dosimetric Reconnaissance Group of the shelter facility. Now, we provided information if we had some kind of planned expedition to survey a certain route, to measure radiation doses along a certain route, to study something new. Undoubtedly. But again, we were always, first of all, limited by doses. But in this case, too, we did exactly the same thing. We hit our doses, and we hit them deliberately. And here again, we need to talk about knowledge of radiation safety or danger. When you know what you're risking, meaning you knowingly take that risk. You know what it could mean for you, and you consciously work, you avoid the maximum doses. And even if you do get something, one way or another, you still get it when you go there. You have time to compensate for the dose you receive. Healthy lifestyle. In the early 2000s, like 99 or 2000, I quit drinking alcohol completely. I haven't had a drink in a quarter of a century. I just sniff it now. No, I'm serious. I can tell just by the smell if it's some cheap swill or real vodka, you know?
Yeah, smell and alcohol. That needs to be clarified.
I sniff it, yeah, it's like a smell tasting. Because your sense of smell gets sharper, that's why. Well, that's how it is.
You're saying that we were showing incorrect, as I understand it, the management was showing incorrect measurements of how much radiation you were exposed to. Was there a particular threshold for you, a point where you realized you needed to stop and not go any further?
No. Well, first of all, most of the time, if we were going out to take photos or videos, we didn't take the instruments with us. You see, in those fields, when the level of external radiation, for example, could range from 50 rengens, 20, up to 200 rengens. There really isn't much difference whether you stay there for a minute, 30 seconds, or 2 minutes. There's no significant difference. What matters is the order of magnitude, whether it's tens of roentgens, hundreds, or thousands. When you start to smell ozone, that's when it's really the end. The late 80s, the 90s, up until about the mid-90s, even into the second half of the 90s. When we would approach the upper levels, the central hall, you'd start to smell ozone. I always compared it to a thunderstorm in early May. The air gets so ionized that you can actually smell ozone, just like after a thunderstorm. And that means you can't stay here for long. It means the radiation levels here are 800, 900 rengens per hour, or even higher. So with those levels, the air actually gets ionized. And when you know that, you don't just stand there enjoying it like, wow, it smells amazing, wow. No, you get your job done quickly and get out of there.
Well, will it be quick, like tens of seconds, or just seconds?
Well, look, it depends on what the task is. If the task is, most often the task, was to make a video and photo shoot, then this took a few minutes. Let's take a trip to the central hall. We rarely spent more than 15 minutes in the hall itself. Most often it was 10 to 12 minutes. And that cost us about 15 to 20 rem. But the radiation levels there are very different. From 500 to 2,800 rengens per hour. So that's why there's such a range. Plus, our photos and videos were used by the station administration and at that time by the shelter facility. My father was the director of the shelter facility. He knew exactly where I was going, but he never said a word to me about it. Later on, a while back, he told me, well, you're a dosimetrist. You know what you're getting into. In other words, he trusted my knowledge. And they used these materials to show Western investors for Shelter 2 as well, to show what's actually inside the shelter, what's really there, and what condition it's in. The point was, they needed to scare them. I mean, scare them with the reality. Until you actually go in there yourself, it's just a box on top of a box, and who the hell knows what's inside?
And besides you, were there others who wanted to get in there?
To be honest, not really.
That's strange. Why is that?
No, you know, I even welcomed people from the same group of dosimetrists from the 4th block who weren't eager to go there. I always said, if you're afraid of something, it's better not to go.
А вот 48-й канал.
An atmosphere of fear can be transmitted even through video. This is just one of Oleksandr Kupnyi's visits to the sarcophagus. The filming was done by his partner, cameraman Serhiy Koshalev. The constant beeping of the dosimeter in the background only intensifies the overall mood of the footage.
Do you remember your very first time going in there? If you think back to when you first walked in, what were you feeling emotionally?
Well, like I said before, if you're scared, don't go.
But still, there has to be at least a little bit of fear, right?
You see, when you want to achieve something, like, say, a mountain climber climbing up a mountain, do you think he's scared or not? Probably, yeah, but the desire to conquer it outweighs that fear. A spelunker, when he's going down into caves, he's probably scared too, but he still goes anyway. It's kind of the same thing here. Exactly. So, if you're scared, don't go. If you're scared, don't do it. It was interesting. Like I said, I don't really know how to describe it. It sounds weird, I get that, but it really was interesting and exciting. And you don't really think about fear. It kind of distances you from it. That's adrenaline. When I was already working in the information department, I had the chance to sneak into the facility guerrilla style, to go into the shelter, to visit the central hall. I still had connections in dosimetry. The guys working there are my people. I would just call and ask who's on shift. Yeah, guys, I want to come over. Get the suits and dosimeters ready for you. Nah, we'll manage, Sonia. Just come in. Well, we didn't see you. All right, go ahead. When you coming? In half an hour. Well, if I don't show up in half an hour, you know where to look for me.
I'm curious, how did that moment happen? It reminds me of the movie Chernobyl, where they were picking divers and you had to go down, right? To do your job down there. Of course, it all looked dramatic, but there was real tension. But for you, it wasn't like you specifically were ordered to go, right? Was it purely your own choice? No, nothing like that. Just a dream?
No. There could have been a general task set for us. For example, what condition is the central hall in? Or what condition is the fuel mass in? Because we also dealt with this so-called elephant's foot in room 217. Thanks to our photos and videos. Somewhere in the early 2000s, it was already clear that it was crumbling. That is, the super hard ceramic mass, which, according to various accounts, people had to shoot at, sometimes with a Kalashnikov, sometimes with a carbine, it doesn't matter, but they had to shoot it just to get a sample. That's how hard it was. But after almost 15 years, it all started to crack, become brittle, and crumble away. That's how brittle it became. So it transforms into another form, more like radioactive dust. And that's thanks to our imaging.
Was there something that really surprised you? Something you just had to tell others about afterward?
After several trips to the central hall, when I set myself the task of figuring out where the lower part of the RZM machine was, since it's made up of several parts, a lead sarcophagus and 3 sections, we can see 2 of them, meaning it was thrown up, flipped over, and now it's just sticking out like this. But where's the 4th one? I examined that piece, and eventually it turned out that during the explosion, when Elena blew up the overhead crane that the RZM was on, the lower part was torn off by the force of the impact. Plus, what really caught my attention was when I found this huge sheet of metal by the eastern wall. It was just insanely huge. It was bent like this, stretching across the central hall. I took a picture of it, and when I got home, I started trying to figure out what it was. And it turns out this is what it was. It was the reactor casing, meaning it was this massive sheet of metal that, how should I put it? It wrapped around all the graphite masonry, enclosing it, and was connected on top to the slab and on the bottom to the OR system. How did it end up there? And when I put all this together in my mind, I was just stunned by how powerful the explosion was. I mean, without seeing all of this, without seeing the destruction it caused, it's hard to understand, to realize, and to accept just how powerful the explosion was. When I realized that the end walls, or rather the end western and eastern walls of the central hall are 90 centimeters thick, while the southern and northern walls, along which the bridge crane with the RSM moved, are 1.20 meters. So half of the northern wall is missing, and that's 1.20 meters of reinforced concrete. These are the kinds of chunks lying around in the central hull. That's how powerful the explosion was. You can only really understand it, I'll say it again, by actually being there. Seriously, man, just talking about it now gives me goosebumps. And there was even a third one, but that one wasn't really an explosion, I'd say. So the nature of it all was very different. Thermal, nuclear in nature. That was the second explosion, when the reactor core... So the explosion lifted part of the reactor core along with it. And the third one, I'd say, was more like a vacuum bomb effect. After the second explosion right in the central hull, there was extremely rarefied air, almost like a vacuum. Not a complete vacuum, of course, but pretty close to it. And then it collapsed in on itself. A lot of people say there were 2 or 3 explosions. That third bang is actually the sound of that collapse. Again, I came to this conclusion by studying photographs.
So was there a nuclear explosion? Because everyone is arguing. Thermal, someone says nuclear.
That's the point. This is, how to say, a series of explosions of different natures. The first one is thermal, and the pressure increased massively, which is why it lifted the E-plate along with everything else. The reactor casing, the core, part of it was lifted. Well, according to different estimates, 15, at most 20 meters. Of what? The second explosion is nuclear in nature, because the energy released in the second explosion came from a chain nuclear reaction. But it's not an atomic bomb. Here's where there's a fine line you need to understand. But the nature is nuclear, because the energy was released as a result of a chain nuclear reaction. It might have lasted just thousandths or millionths of a second, but that was enough to blow everything apart.
It was enough.
The whole year did. Because if it had just been limited to the first explosion, if it had lifted and then settled back down, there wouldn't have been that kind of destruction.
Just your personal opinion. I've asked a lot of experts this too. Would Chernobyl have happened sooner or later anyway? Because if you look at the history, there were already emergency situations in '82 and '84. The KGB wrote some reports saying there were cracks in the first 2 reactors, that there were shortcomings.
I would point out several reasons, because there isn't just one single cause. Chernobyl is a chain of events that actually starts with ideology. If academician Alexandrov claims that the RBMK is so safe you could put it on Red Square, you tend to believe him. Well, an academician said it, right? I mean, he's no fool, he's a smart guy. And that phrase, that ideology, was picked up by the Central Committee of the Communist Party and all the ideological structures of that time. Naturally, for students studying nuclear power plants, they're taught that a Soviet reactor can't explode. It's the safest reactor in the world. Sure, there might be some incidents, but it simply can't explode. This, I believe, is the first mistake, an ideological one. The second is the implementation of the graphite-moderated channel reactor project itself. The idea itself, as paradoxical as it may sound to many, is actually a good one. It can operate practically, not forever, but for a very long time. You don't have to shut it down for refueling like you do at a VVER. On-the-fly refueling. That's awesome. For example, you can produce irradiated silicon in it, which is used in electronics, and you can't make it anywhere else. By the way, they actually did that with the RBMK. There was a separate technological channel where they produced irradiated silicon. So under neutron irradiation, its crystal lattice structure would change, and somehow its properties would improve. Plus the production and extraction of various isotopes for medicine. So there are a lot of positive qualities. And the next step for the RBMK would have been nuclear superheating of steam. So the steam that was produced back then would be passed through the core a second time, making it drier, and the temperature and efficiency of the reactor and fuel were higher. The implementation was spot on. For example, how was the VVR implemented? First 320, then 440, then only 1,000.
Is everything going okay?
Yes. That is, they started with low-power reactors. They examined, researched, implemented, improved, and fixed some of the flaws. What did they do with the RBMK?
Right off the bat.
They went straight to 1,000. And then the problems started to show up, specifically design flaws, project flaws. They tried to improve it gradually, but the Soviet Union's ideological, bureaucratic machine was very slow to change. In the end, it led to Chernobyl. Of course, the staff also made some mistakes, but if it hadn't been for the earlier mistakes, nothing would have happened. Well, I don't agree that Chernobyl killed the Soviet Union. Before that, there was already the boron program, which was eating up a crazy amount of money. Boron is a shuttle, a copy of the American shuttle. We were building 3 shuttles at the same time. One was finished and it flew once. There were 2 at different stages of readiness. That is, according to my estimates, no less money was spent there than was later spent on the liquidation of the Chernobyl accident. The boron program was closed in the late 1980s after Chernobyl. 88th year. The entire city of Spitak was destroyed by the earthquake. It was December, 500,000 people out on the street. An unbelievable amount of money was poured into that, too. Plus, the economic situation of the Union itself, let's just say, wasn't great either.
Well, all the pieces just kind of came together, more or less, at the same time.
I wouldn't say that Chernobyl was to blame. Again, it's a chain of events. Plus, I'd say that Gorbachev put the final nail in the coffin for all of this. Or rather, not him personally. He saw that the system in the Soviet Union had already run its course, so he pushed for a new, updated Union treaty that would give more rights to the republics. Basically, it was federalization. And he was ready, and 9 republics had already agreed. And then what happens? A coup d'etat, the State Committee on the State of Emergency, GKCHP. Gorbachev gets pushed aside. They didn't want a renewed union. So the top of the Central Committee said, no, we'll keep things as they are. That's when Yeltsin steps onto the stage. Moscow, the White House standoff, the assault. And then the logical conclusion of the Belarusian meeting, the signing of the agreement to create the CIS. Basically, the collapse of the Soviet Union.
In one interview, you mentioned, for example, that the batteries in your flashlights would die. Did you ever have moments like that when you were really in a stressful situation and you could have gotten stuck?
Well, yes, that happened. There was a time when we went into the steam release corridor, Sergei Koshelev. So we entered this room that was almost filled to the ceiling with concrete. We were squatting, just sitting there on our haunches with the ceiling right above us and concrete all around. So Seryozha, with the camera and the light, crawled over to the valves where the fuel had leaked out and solidified to film it. So my buddy and I stayed by the entrance, waiting for him to come back. And I noticed the flashlight is starting to betray us and go out. You see, because of the radiation, the batteries would drain really fast. Yeah, it just drains them. Even though you always charge them up before heading out, it still happens. And so this was exactly one of those times when everything was yellow, just yellow everywhere, and it was just total darkness. We don't have any matches, we didn't bring them. But the second guy with us, who was walking along, one of the dosimetrists, he wanted to help out. He had a DP meter, a DP5 with him. And the scale has a backlight. And that's when your knowledge of geography comes in handy. I mean, you know how you got here. There you go. Knowledge of the radiation situation, the environment. You know that. Well, you know that along your route, there's nothing too extreme. Maybe somewhere it's half a engine, maybe somewhere it's a engine, but honestly, for shelter, that's nothing. That's peanuts. There you go. When Seryoga comes back, his camera's light is already, well, that's why he came back too. He sat down as well. There you do. We used the DP's backlight, which only lit up about half a meter, just enough to see where to put our feet, and crawled out slowly, feeling our way along. And then later we were like, oh man, what if we hadn't had the DP's light? That would have been a total disaster, seriously. After that, we started bringing matches with us.
Well, let's say, hypothetically, if you get killed, does someone come out after you, or do the guys just handle things themselves? Could it really happen like that?
Well, in that case, we never went out alone. There was only one time I went out by myself, and that was in 2009 when I was leaving the station. Well, I wanted to, as strange as it may sound, again, kind of paradoxically, say goodbye to the central hall. I went there during the day. Of course, I let people know. The dosimetrist left, and I was already heading into the hall. That was the only time I ever went alone. And even then, I was there for literally 5 to 7 minutes. Said, thank you for letting me live. So I kind of communicated with the hall mentally on an energy level and then left. But again, I want to emphasize that was the one and only time. Usually we would go in pairs at the very least, so if something happened to one person, the other could help. Either they'd pull you out or call someone for help.
The story about the flashlights reminded me of an episode from the series Chernobyl, when the plant workers, the liquidators, put on diving suits and went down into the area beneath the reactor to open the valves and drain the water in order to prevent an even more powerful explosion. Well, in the series, the atmosphere, as I remember it now, was extremely tense. Their flashlights were also going out, but in the end, they completed their mission. I wanted to ask you about the Chernobyl series. It caused quite a stir. Did you watch it?
I had to.
What are your thoughts? I'm curious to hear a professional's take, as reactions vary. One liquidator in Kazakhstan watched it and later jumped from a window. He had headaches and, well, all of this really pained him. There were even reactions like that, ones people don't really talk about much. What were your emotions?
My very first reaction was, God, what kind of crap did they make? You've already gathered a ton of information. You've studied a lot, talked to people, and you know what really happened and why. And then suddenly you see a very loose interpretation, a really loose one. The first thing that bothered me was that they didn't change the last names of the main people involved. So in this feature film, they portray Fomin, Bryukhanov, characters that don't even come close to the real people. That really bothered me. I thought, guys, you could have at least asked their relatives if they were okay with it. Ideally, they should have gotten permission.
And were they very different in the movie compared to how they were in real life?
Yes. I mean, I didn't know him personally, but I talked to people who did know them. Yeah, they're completely different characters, both there and there. I mean, both in the movie and in real life. Plus, as I saw, the minister, the coal minister, comes to the miners and asks, what do Soviet miners do during their lunch break? Right, they drink vodka. Твою же мать, как так? A Soviet miner sits in a trailer during his lunch break and drinks.
Well, it was just a bit of a stereotypical thing back then.
So he comes out and they're pointing guns at him. I mean, that's just total surrealism. The helicopter that crashed on October 2nd, I think, at the beginning, I think it was October 2nd, 1986 when it crashed. For some reason, it crashes in May. Come on, guys, how does that make sense? So where's the historical accuracy? Why are you switching everything around?
So, what did you like about the headline?
Nothing. You could offer a mild excuse, like, well, the series Chernobyl got young people interested in Chernobyl. Well, maybe some people did get interested, but for the most part, people just watched it, gasped a bit, and went about their business, and that was it. I'm pretty sure that over 90% of them didn't dig any deeper. And those divers, come on. There are even Anonenkoff's recollections. There was only about this much water, that's it. What divers? Nobody dove anywhere.
By the way, let us know in the comments if you like the series Chernobyl. I think Oleksandr Kupnyi is actually someone who can criticize it, because he studied the Chernobyl disaster in incredible detail, not just from documents or memories, but by risking his own health and sometimes even his life. There's actually a blog online where the question is asked directly. How did Oleksandr Kupnyi survive after so many times going into the shelter? People are still amazed. Did it affect your health in any way? Or did you handle it well, always knowing your limits and everything turned out fine?
One way or another, as I've already said, we still keep track of our dose. And into the hall, the elephant's foot, some sketchy places, the reactor shaft, we never went more than twice. Altogether in a year, at most 3 times, we didn't go more than that. With 2 visits, you could pick up about 25. That is the emergency dose that's allowed for personnel. 5 to 25. And then you don't go anywhere. It gets compensated. If I had gotten all the dose I accumulated over that whole time at once, if I had received it all at once, then yeah, probably something would have shown up somewhere. But when that dose is spread out over 10 to 15 years, we get hazard pay for it.
Friends, let us know in the comments what you think of this video. You can also leave your greetings for Oleksandr Kupnyi. I hope he'll read all of them too. Don't forget to subscribe to the Page of X channel, like this video, and of course, if you can, become our sponsor.